Good evening, everyone. I am Vinay Suram, a teacher educator at Azim Premji Foundation and part of the editorial committee of iwonder. Let me take a moment to give you a brief idea about iwonder. So, iwonder is a science magazine for middle and high school teachers. It features writings about the many dimensions of teaching and learning science in the classroom and outside it. This magazine is published in English, Hindi, and Kannada twice a year. So, for all those practicing science teachers who are watching this video right now, we invite you to write for us. To do this, please send your idea in less than 100 words to iwonder at apu.edu.in. If you would like to receive updates of each webinar and also a free print version of the issue, subscribe to us by following the link displayed in the description of this video. We are also on Facebook. You can catch us there as well. By the way, an interesting news, our latest issue is now online. The main theme of this issue is our chemical world. You can see the link scrolling right now. So you can visit the link to read the magazine. Please do read and share your thoughts. The same email ID, iwonder at apu.edu.in. So I welcome you all again to our monthly webinars. As you know, the second Wednesday of every month, we invite authors of an article in iWonder to have an interaction with them, listen to their thoughts, and share our questions and hear their responses. For today's webinar, we have with us Anish Mokashi, author of the article Paying Attention to What Children Do, Explorations of Sounds. So this article was published in our December 2021 issue. Let me take a moment to introduce Anish. Anish works with the physics and teacher education groups at Azim Premji University, Bangalore. He has a background in experimental physics and works in science education. Anish has previously taught undergraduate students at IISc, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, worked with Ekalavya Bhopal on science teacher education, and also taught at Purna Learning Center, Bangalore. He is interested in connecting doing and thinking in the context of learning science, students' ideas and meaning making, cultures of teaching learning, and the history of science. Anish, thank you for joining us. So, let me just give you a brief overall view of the structure of this webinar. Uh, so, for the first 30 minutes, I will ask Anish some questions to delve a little deeper into the article. As all of those who have streamed in, please type in your questions in the chat box. The last 30 minutes of the webinar, I will request Anish for his insights on these questions. Thank you, Anish. We start.
Thank you, Vinay. Thanks a lot for having me here.
Yeah. So you had some interesting quotes to share. I really
Sure,
like
I'll
those
do
quotes
that.
of
I'll do
Ashpal.
that.
Yeah.
I'll just do that. So I thought I'll share this quote. In fact, this is how I end the article with, because Yashpal talks. Maybe let's take a minute to read it, or maybe I can read it out. Right? Since children usually perceive and observe more than grown-ups, their potential role as knowledge creators need to be appreciated. From personal experience, I can say with assurance that a lot of my limited understanding is due to my interaction with children. This is what Professor Yashpal says in his foreword to the NCF 2005. And he's not being overtly humble or anything like that. He's very serious about this. And in fact, in the same year, he writes an article in the Hindu called Towards a Child Inspired Curriculum. Not just child
Mhm.
centered, but child inspired. So, yeah, this was
Oh,
one article I wanted to share again.
yeah. But that's a beautiful statement, and it also sets a good context for our discussion as well. especially the article, the view in which the article was written. So usually as teachers and educators, our observations of students largely focuses on assessing their classroom behavior, attentiveness in class, interest in the topic or activity, comprehension, etc. But in this article, you want the teachers to observe something else. I mean, you invite them to observe something else. How children explore a physical and natural phenomena by paying close attention to what children do. What do you mean by observing with close attention?
Right. Actually, in fact, I would say this is probably even applicable at the undergraduate or postgraduate level too. Because normally, when we think of what is the role of experiments or what is the role of doing anything, say hands on, we generally tend to do something like, okay, we let us verify XYZ. Okay, let us see, let us verify. So it's something that has been planned in advance by the teacher, which is necessary. The teacher needs to prepare in advance, right? But what is interesting is that the teacher and grown-ups, and we can learn from grown-ups also. There's nothing special about really, I would say, about only children. Uh, So when we do something, even if it is something like, you say, verify, say, Newton's law of motion, something like that, right? But when you have real people, human beings doing that, they will always do something more than just what has been asked. Okay? And this comes up very uh, with lot of clarity, I would say, comes out. This emerges, especially with young children, I would say, I think, because they tend to do much more than what we expect them to do. But if the teacher is not on the lookout for, something is going to happen. Someone, maybe one out of the 10 children, is going to do something new. Maybe say it may not be only about doing something. That's another thing. It could be
Mm.
also something that a new idea that a child has to share, a student has to share. It may be a wrong idea also. But as long as it's a novel idea or a novel act, like of doing something, the teacher might realize that they hadn't thought about this before. They hadn't looked at this in this way before. That was the main idea behind saying that, paying close attention.
Mm. So you suggested this approach, make teachers more aware of the preconceptions that they may hold about children and their capacities. Look, could you share a few examples, about what could be these preconceptions, and how does this help the teacher? I mean, how does this awareness uh, change one's practice as a teacher?
Right. Actually, it is. I think it's more about something that we are going to talk later on, also in the slides and all that. But it's more about being open to learn new things from everyone, acknowledging that every person is an intelligent human being. It's a different stance of looking at your own practice, looking at the children and people that you are with. It's a shift in the outlook. That now you are looking at people in a different way. For example, many of us, we feel, since you asked this question, many of us, including I would say, somewhere in our minds, we make these assumptions that, or impressions that this is a good student, an intelligent student, this is a weak student, oh, this student is not able to express clearly, or doesn't have a good vocabulary, whatever. We make these for good and bad, because we as teachers also, we have to plan accordingly, right? We want to say that I don't want to use something which is beyond this child's level of understanding at this point, right? And then we would accordingly decide what do we want to teach and how we want to explain something to some child and so on, right? But in the process of doing this, of forming opinions, which are needed actually, I'm not saying let's not think on those terms what a child needs. But in the process of doing that, let's not forget that a child can offer lot of insight, and a child is a intelligent human being beyond those categories of weak in maths, whatever, weak in English, that kind of categories. So it was more about recognizing that there's something beyond what we generally think. What are our assumptions of? Um, yeah, that's what I meant to say.
So I think this is quite nicely put. So to extend it further, one of in the article, one of your examples says about paying attention to your the 3-year-old daughter's spontaneous explorations of sound, and use digital exploration to design activities for high school students. Can you tell us a little more about this? And what aspects were you able to draw into designing this activity?
I just realized, Vinay, that I didn't answer your previous question fully. Okay, because I'll get to the previous question again and then come to this. Since you asked me for an example of, but maybe this example is also fine. But anyway, I'll give you an example that I haven't shared earlier. That example, I went to a school in Bangalore and I was observing a class. Okay, and they were, mm, this was a ninth grade class, older students, and they were
Mhm.
doing experiments on electrostatics. They had ping pong balls that were covered with aluminum foil, and with
Mhm.
a sellotape, you stick it to a silk thread or a nylon thread and hang it. Okay. Then you take a straw, you rub the straw, plastic straw, with piece of paper and charge it, and you bring the straw close to the aluminum foil, wrap the, the ping pong ball that is wrapped with
Ping pong
aluminum
ball.
foil, right? And then you get induction, and it gets attracted. The ball gets attracted to the charged
Straw.
straw, right? And then it gets charged. The ball gets charged. Okay. Now the students were doing many of these experiments, charging by induction, charging. You can get another ball next to it and touch it, and then move it away while the straw is still closed. All many interesting things. Okay, but the teacher posed a question to the students that the question was, okay, this is a ping pong ball covered with aluminum foil. We have given it some charge. Okay, now I get another ball. It may be smaller or bigger, whatever, similarly covered with aluminum foil, and I touch this to the earlier ball. How much charge will go from the charged ball to the uncharged ball? Okay? This was, I think, much beyond what was expected in ninth grade. Okay? The teacher just
Mhm.
wanted to see what students think. And they thought about it. Then a particular child, she had an answer, which was that, see, when you have a hot and a cold object and you touch them, the heat flows from the hot object to the cold object till they reach the same temperature, right? Similarly, when you have a charged and an uncharged object, when you touch them, the charge will flow from the charged to the uncharged object till whatever is like temperature in this situation will become equal. Okay. And this was astounding because she has already motivated the idea of electric potential without realizing it. Okay. And how children are able to make these connections. Sometimes these connections are made in talking. Sometimes children, because they were doing experiments, she was able to recollect some previous work. But this whole process that children engage in, that of making meaning out of what they see, what they think, what they wonder, I think that is what teachers need to be attentive to, because that is where the roots of human sciences, how I human beings started thinking about natural phenomena, because of similar processes which children are already doing through their efforts of making sense of what's happening, of phenomena, of concepts, that way. Yeah. And should I come to the second question
Yeah,
now?
I mean, you could also share so how your 3-year-old daughter's experience
Right.
inspired your activity with high school students.
Yeah, this was completely random actually. So I had to go to Bhopal to work with the Clicks team, which was there in 2017, and we were going to make a module on sound for high school students. This has been used in many states, and I think even outside India they're using it in Africa and Latin America, I think. So anyway, I was going to travel to Bhopal from Bangalore, and the night before I went, my child, she got a balloon. She was playing with the balloon and doing just random things. For hours together, children can play, right? But she had something to tell me, and she could speak by then. That is another thing, right? She could
Yeah.
already speak, so she could call me and tell me, okay, see what is this and all that, what I'm seeing. So actually she made me hold the balloon in my hands. Then she stood next to the balloon and said something like, "Ooh," something like that. Okay, and I could feel the balloon vibrate. Okay. Now, I had never seen this before. I had never experienced, okay, someone is shouting and I can actually feel that the balloon is vibrating because someone is shouting, right? Someone is talking, right? So basically, we always talk about sound waves, they travel in the air, but we can't see sound waves because air is transparent and so on, right? But here, you can actually feel the sound because someone is speaking. The sound waves travel from that person's mouth to the space around, and the balloon is there. The sound waves fall on the balloons, the balloon vibrates because of that, right? So we can make the connections of a vibration and sound as a wave that travels through air. So this is the idea that me and I shared it with my colleagues there at Clicks, Hani Singh and Dinesh Kumar Verma, and then we thought, how can we make, maybe this is relevant to uh, even think about sound for high school students, about propagation of sounds. And then we made that worksheet for that. Yeah.
So I can see the teacher in you getting out there, having a spark moment there.
Yeah, actually, Vinay, that's an interesting question point, because teachers have to be, I think, on the lookout, for new ideas and new ways to introduce ideas to their students and so on. Even in a normal chalk and talk classroom, right? Not
True.
necessarily in the in a hands-on
Activity
learning,
based setup.
activity-based setup, right?
Yeah. So, while mentioning all these things, you also clarify that this is not meant to romanticize children and their abilities, but merely you emphasize on the need to recognize them for what they are. No, could you explain this with an example?
Yeah, actually romanticize in the way that, you know, I feel that maybe I don't know, maybe when we tend to glorify things, right? I don't want to go into some glorification of children, how children are, and people are already studying, cognitive scientists are studying about how children, very young children, children below 1 year, are also doing some kind of rational, logical thinking, which they feel is close to the scientific,
Hmm.
uh, not the scientific method, because there is no one scientific method. Really look at it, there's no linear scientific method. No, first you make a hypothesis, then you make an experiment,
Yeah.
then you see all. It's not always that linear. No, right? It's
Yeah.
many diverse ways of doing science. But people, cognitive scientists, are studying how children's meaning making, sense making processes uh, kind of parallel scientific kind of work, scientific thinking and so on. But I'm not really that much into that. I'm not that much into all that. I would say that not just children, even grown-ups, if we can give dignity to people's thinking,
Hmm.
people's ideas, that will really help a lot in not just the confidence that you have that someone listens to me, and yeah, people are here. This is and what I feel is important because that is something that you need to have, like a self-esteem, right? That what you feel, what you do, what you think is something worth sharing, uh, which sometimes all these voices get kind of washed out because of so many other things, no? So many cultural aspects also, right? How we look at a child, that those kind of things. So mostly on those lines, I meant that particular.
Yeah. So while you're sharing this thing, there was some other reference in your article when you speak of proto science. Maybe we can talk about it later uh,
Okay,
when it comes to that.
sure. Actually, Vinay, I had an idea. Okay, so
Yeah.
there was a quote. It was a kind of a strong quote, I would say. Okay, it's a little strong
Mhm.
quote. It's a more critical kind of a quote, which I would like all of us to read right now. So I want to share
Yeah.
my screen and go back to that uh, because I think it's more critical because yeah, maybe all of us, maybe let us take. I hope it is visible.
Shall I
And
read it out if it helps?
sure, sure, sure. Yes, please do that.
Yeah. Another way of describing what school does to children is infantilizing them, treating them like children, so to speak. School treats them like children in an impoverishing sense, where children are assumed to be people who don't have good ideas, whose knowledge is limited, who have to be told rather than exploring, discovering, creating, possessing knowledge. I think that's the shift that we can bring around about, and we have to. I see setting up that vision as the most important, maybe the most important act in the world, because all the other things like saving the environment and the planet will flow from new ways of thinking that depend in turn on children growing up with a different relationship to knowledge and with the world and a different vision of themselves. Oh,
Thank you, Vinay.
this is
Thanks a lot.
really nice and loaded. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is by Seymour Papert, and Seymour Papert is known as among many things, a mathematician who turned into an educationist, and he was behind a lot of work that is still being done in MIT Media Labs. And he came up with the idea of constructionism, right? That when you have things to really touch and feel, not necessarily physical things also, okay, things to manipulate, it could be a
Yeah.
computer thing also actually, but when you have stuff to manipulate, that helps in the construction of knowledge. So basically not just constructivism that knowledge can't be transferred from teacher to student, just pick it and dump it on the student. That student has to build his or her own understanding knowledge in his or her own way, right? In a construct, this is what constructivism would say, right? To allow
Yeah.
that process to happen. What Peppert says is that this process is helped by when you have things to manipulate and touch and feel and all that, right? So this, I'm not aware of the entire context of this particular quote, huh? But what I
Mhm.
like, as you said also about this quote, is that rethinking our relationship, children's relationship with knowledge. And I think it connects well with what Yashpal has to say about how children can be creating knowledge, right? And children can be questioning knowledge also, right? Because if you only when you can question and think, rethink, reflect, can you come up with new knowledge, right?
It's
So
true,
that
true.
the point of dignity comes up. And
Mhm.
in fact, if you allow me, I'll just go ahead and talk about those points also because I think it
Sure,
fits
sure.
with to what the article is about. Like this is we are
Mhm.
talking about a cultural change in some kind of a different culture of how we learn, how we teach, how we treat each other, and So in a way that in our everyday interactions, right? I'm sure all of us try to teach, try to treat our students with dignity, and vice versa, and our colleagues and so on, right? This is a basic thing, right? But how can this, beyond this, to think that yes, every interaction with every human being is basically an opportunity to think further than what you already know, right? To
Mm-hmm.
change, the change in the shift is that now you have to be aware that you are interacting with an intelligent human being, who is capable of coming up with wonderful ideas. To always have this in mind, that yes, now something great is going to happen now. Enter your class, some student is going to tell me something which I don't know. But that kind of humility maybe we need as teachers, right? And the basic dignity and respect in the sense that to be able to be heard, to hear and to be heard, both, right? Both.
Mm-hmm.
And especially I would say in the context of science, because science is generally presented as the work of great people who are beyond us, who are of a different order of intelligence and so on, right? But the to basically to acknowledge the fact that all human beings are capable of wonderful ideas, and right? That is something. And the last, I would say, this point of documenting, this is what I would like to talk about further. We would like to discuss that further.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I mean, I can see a huge shift in the from point one to point two. It's not mere respect and dignity, it's about act. No, we accept that every person is an intelligent human being who has wonderful ideas. And there's a huge scope for learning across the age groups as well. That is something quite interesting. Uh, if I take back to the article, so when we read the article, we get a glimpse of many dimensions of sound. That your middle school students seem to have explored, and in the process, stumbled upon some non-trivial phenomena. So you structure the class starting from asking the students to map soundscapes around them. What inspired you to use this activity to
So
explore sound,
a
rather than
student
directly going
actually.
through blind demos? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a thank you for that question. Actually, I used to teach undergraduate students when I was a PhD student. So they used to be students from all classes, all kinds of courses. Like this particular student I had, who was an architecture student, he walked into the lab with a huge roll of paper, and I asked him, "No, what is this? What do you do in architecture?" And he said that, "Okay, I had to go to this place where we are going to build some structure. We are going to build a house or something. I forget what." And so my assignment was to go there, sit there for a whole day, entire day, sit there and notice what are the sounds coming across time, across like almost like 12 to 15 hours, to understand what is the life of people and the life of course non-humans also in that space, because we are going to build a structure there, a building, a house or a school or something. We need to know what is that space before thinking of how do we build something in that space. So this is where I was. Oh, I thought children should maybe pay attention to already what's happening around them, right? And then we can connect it to sound, because we already have so much sound around us. So that was the idea. That was the uh, genesis of that idea.
Yeah, and the experience that you mentioned, where one of your students actually listed all the birds and the sounds of those birds in and around his
Oh,
house.
yeah, yeah. I have to tell
Was,
that student last year he joined NCBS.
oh,
That
wow.
particular student, he joined NCBS last year actually in their integrated
Okay.
PhD program.
Mhm. So this NCBS is National Center for Biological Sciences, right?
Yes, the one in Bangalore.
Yeah, yeah. That is quite interesting. Uh, Look, in this article, you also draw your attention to observing spontaneous or unplanned explorations, where you share a eureka moment about using powder to visualize sound waves. One may wonder how you would have proceeded if the student had not shared that idea.
Actually, yeah, you're right. Yeah, go on, Vinay. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Should I answer
I
that?
mean,
Okay.
yeah, so how would you plan your classroom
Right,
had such
right,
things have
right.
not been
Yeah,
there?
yeah, yeah. Right, right, right. That's a very important point actually, because now also when I'm teaching undergraduate students, I'm sure most teachers do that, right? You have a plan in mind. You think that, okay, I have this much time and I have to do this, I have to discuss X, Y, Z, these things, right? But whenever some student asks a question or questions what I'm saying, is that really true or when is that really true? All that, I think I look out for those. I try to pounce on those opportunities because then I can I can ask them to think further. Okay, this is what you feel. What does it mean? Okay, can you explain it further? You know, why do you think in this way? So I get a chance as a teacher to understand what students are thinking or how they are thinking and so on. Right? So in this particular case, this was a group of I think 11-year-olds or something at Vidyavanam,
Mhm.
and they were already very active. These children were from the villages and they were very active. They were very enthusiastic and energetic. No one would be like all the time, they will be so. And as a teacher, you have to match that energy, right? I have to eat Parle-G biscuits between classes before going to the next class, right? So, how would this have gone? It's been 10 years. I don't remember what I had thought further, but I think it's important to take these tentative steps. Also, you can fail. It's okay to fail. Also, I feel you know and a teacher should be ready to fail also in front of their students, because only then students will feel that it's okay, it's nothing to be ashamed of to not succeed in doing some experiment or something like that. We always learn something from failures also, I would say.
Yeah. So that's quite interesting because you also mentioned something about gravity capillary waves that a student has stumbled upon. You know. But one of the key aspects or concerns is usually time is a key challenge for teachers in the classroom, and sometimes even though this sounds quite interesting, so digressions from this topic can sometimes seem like they take the class away from the topic. No, what has been your experience, and I know how did you get to connect these experiences to the topic that you were discussing, sound?
Right, right. Actually, sometimes these are not direct. These connections are obviously gravity capillary waves is not even taught at undergraduate level. Okay, surface gravity waves or capillary waves, gravity waves. This is beyond the undergraduate curriculum also. Okay, I would say it's a non-standard. I think probably aeronautical engineering. I don't know who must be learning these ideas. Okay, so but what is important for middle school science, I would say, is that students get the chance to uh, experience phenomena, right? To see things happen in front of them. If you have not, okay, fine, you don't see a surface wave or a gravity wave on a tuning fork. It's fine if you don't do that, but at least play with a tuning fork, understand how it vibrates. It's not necessary that you always reach some non-trivial result, but it's important that you get an experience with these phenomena and get to spend time. Children get to spend time exploring these phenomena. Only then they would want to understand more about what they have experienced, right? And even I would say NCF 2005 was very clear about that, that children get familiarity with phenomena, with effects, things at the middle school level, so that we can talk about more abstract ideas and theories at the high school level and the higher secondary level. So that aspect which is missing in so like I remember as a student and didn't get to really go to the lab or do experiments in my school. Okay? So maybe if I had gotten that opportunity, I would have maybe understood things better in high school. I feel. So connecting it to what you were saying about time constraints, right? That is definitely a big challenge because so many of us at the university also we still feel that even after NCF 2005, the NCRT textbooks, for example, especially the high school and higher secondary textbooks, are science textbooks, are unrealistic. It's like unrealistic for teachers and students to really do so much. That's what many of us feel. It's still too much. And what is important is that even if you this whole idea of going in depth and going in breadth, right? Going in depth and going in breadth. So do you spread yourself thin or do you go in depth or something, right? So the one particular idea is pretty interesting. Many of my colleagues who have been in schools and who've been school teachers also talk about it, and I would say Eleanor Duckworth talks about it also. That in one of her essays, in that the having of wonderful ideas and other essays, Eleanor Duckworth. That the connection of depth and breadth, the belief that going in depth, mainly spending more time in one particular thing, doing things well enough in one particular thing, you know gives you the kind of repertoire, or the kind of the capabilities to start exploring other topics also with confidence, because you know how to explore and understand one particular topic well. You as a learner get the confidence to maybe go in breadth on your own also. But I know it's difficult to justify this in a conventional classroom or in a school. But it's a long term thing. I would say that we should be advocating for students and teachers getting to decide how and what they want to learn, at what pace they want to learn, right? And this is where teacher autonomy is uh, really matters, I feel.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a quite lot of questions to think about as well. Those statements and interesting. So, to make it more explicit, so do you see any differences in how children learn through explorations? In planned activities versus this spontaneous explorations.
I would say that we should always go for planned activities. Okay, that's what I feel. But in a planned activity, be open to students' explorations, because this is something that, in fact, some of my friends who work in design education tell me that to have a structure and to have some constraints is a good thing, actually. Many a times to have a constraint is good, because now within that constraint you will try to explore more, right? So I would say it's good to have a structure, good to have a plan, but as a teacher be open that yeah, some other opportunities might present themselves, you know, that that will help, that might lead to some interesting ideas, interesting explorations, but always have a structure. That's what I feel. But after having the structure, be open to new things that might emerge. That's what I think
This
should
is
be
like a structure with a space for exploration.
yeah. Design, actually structure with a design that there will be explorations and there will be um, students, at least a few students will have new ideas, or would have a new way of doing an experiment or testing something, that a connection that they hadn't made before, to always be aware that this is going to happen. I think that's interesting.
Hmm. So, you suggested offering students this opportunity to explore physical phenomena helps in more than one way. One thing is it allows them to interpret those observations in a way that that can be linked to doing a kind of proto science. Could you give us an example of such student interpretations?
Well, I
And
would say that the example that I spoke earlier, the ninth standard student making inventing the idea of electric potential without knowing it. I mean, that is how, I mean, that's, if you remember how electric potential is introduced, you bring a charge from infinity slowly and get,
okay.
right, the work done to bring the charge and so on, right? That is fine. I mean, that is perfect. But this particular way of thinking about potential, this child came up with, I think that is more direct and more approachable, because it has come from, it is not a distilled kind of a, often, the science that we learn in textbooks is a distilled science, that over centuries people have worked on a concept and on a theory, on an idea, and made mistakes, and someone else corrected it, and then made more mistakes, someone realized, oh no, this is not there, so what we get is a finished kind of a product, right? So to get the opportunity to make these tentative efforts of making sense of something, inventing a new idea, exploring a new phenomenon, that is, I think, to experience the process of science.
No, you also suggest that students may feel an effective connection for phenomena that they have experienced aesthetically. What do you mean by aesthetic experience and effective connection with physical phenomena? And how does this effective connection contribute to science learning?
Right, right, right. Actually, that thanks for that question. Actually, so by affect we mean that something that is related to emotions, right? Emotions is something that we relate to maybe literature, music, arts, right? Performances, theater,
Yeah.
right? Catharsis. But can't, why do we really have, yes, objectivity is one thing, right? But while being objective, do we have to be, like machine like, or I don't know what to say, like robotic? No, right? If we feel thrilled by something, we should express that thrill, and children are able to express that thrill. I can give an example. uh, yeah, yeah, there was the same children actually. Once a child,
Mhm.
they were having some annual day or something like that. Okay, so the classes were not going on, regular classes, but not all children were participating in the annual day stuff. Okay, so once a few children came to me, and I was in the library, and showed me some book and opened it and said, see, there's an experiment here. We want to do that experiment. I said, fine, what do you need? So they said, oh, we want to show that salt water conducts electricity. Okay. So basically, you need cells, and you need a wire, and you need a bulb and water, beaker and water and salt. I said, okay, bring salt. Let's see what happens and so on. So we took a paper clip, that iron paper clip, nickel,
Mhm.
and made it straight, and we put it as electrodes in the water, right? And then connected it to the wire and so on. We did something, and then children put salt, right? And they saw nothing, it's not glowing. We put more salt, then it's not glowing. Some child is thinking, oh, in my home we have this torch, we need two batteries for it, so maybe here also I'll put two batteries. They put two batteries and so on. So they tried different things. Okay, then put salt, it was glowing. Put even more salt, glowed even brightly and so on. But on the sidelines, apart from just verifying that salt water conducts electricity better, because of which the bulb glows brighter, children are observing other things as well. For example, on the electrodes, very fine bubbles of the gas that was forming
Mm.
during this. Actually, it was electrolysis of some sort. No? The child said, "Oh, it looks like a waterfall upside down," because the bubbles are coming up. The waterfall it comes down, it's like say
Yeah.
upside down waterfall or stuff like that. Children are always open to appreciate phenomena aesthetically also, not just we saw bubbles. What does it mean? It's fine. I mean, you have to think logically and all that, but they don't separate the two. I feel thinking logically and appreciating the beauty of a phenomenon. I think this is something that teachers also we need to be more open and maybe loosen up a little and not really be that. Yeah, that was the point I was trying to make.
Yeah. So you also point out to the various possibilities and opportunities for teachers to move towards a more democratic discourse around science in the classroom. No, could you please elaborate on this?
I think it's related to the points that we just discussed, right? When we talk about
Dignity
dignity
and
and respect, automatically we have to be a democratic setup, right? If we
mm,
want to give dignity, we have to be a democratic school, we have to be a democratic teacher, because then the authority of the teacher or the authority of the textbook is not what matters. It's what what makes sense to students, what is sensible. No? In fact,
mm,
I would like to share a quote which I had not planned to share, but I'll just share it right now because I think it's relevant to. One second, I'll just share it.
yeah,
Since you
yeah,
brought this out, what is democratic and what is science? What is the relation of? Maybe the relation is not obvious, but uh, I would like you to read this.
yeah. So this is Gautama Buddha's. I mean, how do we read it? Kalama Sutta.
Kalam Sutta, yeah.
Kalama Sutta from Sutta Pitika.
Sutta Pitaka is this whole compendium of
So,
sutras, right? Basically, the Buddha went to XYZ place. Someone asked him a question
mhm.
about this, and this is what he responded, and so on. So, this is one of the sutras.
So I'll read it
Actually,
out.
sure, sure.
So do not believe in what you have heard. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for many generations. Do not believe in anything because it is rumored and spoken by many. Do not believe merely because a written statement of some old sage is produced. Do not believe in conjectures. Do not believe in that as truth to which you have become attached from habit. Do not believe merely the authority of your teachers and elders. After observation and analysis, that it agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and gain of one and all, then accept it and live up to it. This, yeah,
So actually,
this is quite
I found,
interesting.
because you spoke about democratic, so the authority of the teacher or the textbook, it's not just about science as a received wisdom or received knowledge. We need to recognize science as a process that human beings, as a process and a body of knowledge, both that human beings have created, right? Human beings like us, right? So
Yeah,
I think that's where probably I see some connection with a democratic classroom also, right? Only in a democratic classroom can you be skeptical, can you go back and forth, can you have the space to be tentative, to go wrong, to make some new to. You know. So I find it amazing that we have a tradition of some kind of a scientific temper from 2500 years back also. Okay. I just wonder now, Vinay, should I talk about the documentation thing now?
Yeah, I think it helps a lot, especially,
Okay. Okay. So basically, Vinay, like the idea that how do we make it happen? You know, how do we
yeah.
do this documentation of everyday wonderful ideas, explorations, connections that we make in our classroom as teachers, with students. Sometimes we as teachers also have wonderful inspired ideas, right? In the process of preparing for a class, we make some connections that were not apparent for us before this, right? Or when we meet our students and while explaining something or while talking about something with our students, we make some connections, right? But these things, they stay somewhere in our memory. Then we talk about it with our friends, maybe our colleagues, and we forget about it, right? So the idea of documentation, I think there is a lot to learn from early childhood education. Okay, so I would like to share this. So there is, I think many of us might know about this um particular early childhood education model, actually called Reggio Emilia. So Reggio Emilia is a place in northern Italy, which after the Second World War, it was completely devastated. You know, everything had been bombed. Okay, so in fact, there were women's unions actually in that area that decided that this was just after the Second World War. That they decided that we don't want this to happen again. We want our children to be able to relate to other children, other people. You don't want this horror to happen again. You know? How do we make this happen? So they literally uh, picked up bricks from bombed buildings and built new schools. Okay, and their whole idea was to create some kind of education model in which children can relate to each other, they listen to each other, they don't become fascists and Nazis again, you know, that kind of thing. And that those kind of schools are still there today. And I want to share some aspects from that actually. And so the idea was, what can we learn from these early childhood education practices and principles and concepts, uh, learn how we can be better at teaching science at the middle school and high school level. So let me play a clip actually by this person called Carlina Rinaldi, who had been associated with the Reggio Emilia schools for a very long time, all her life. And we can maybe pause and talk about it later. I'll play this clip now.
What is important is that people like me, that are supposed to be experts or life teachers, don't go there to tell them what they have to do, but they go there to listen. Listen is the key word of this approach, because if you consider the other, the child, the other in general, as a competent, the first key resilience that you have to develop is to listen. To listen means not only to listen with the ears, but to listen with yourself, your body, your eyes, your skin, your own personality, to be able to change in the dialogue, to be able to be transported where the other want to go, not because it's right or wrong, but because the real dialogue can start.
Okay, so basically, she's introducing their approach because they call it the pedagogy of listening. So to document
Okay.
something, you have to first listen, right? You have to first be attentive, right? So I think this is a very short clip, but I had mentioned this book called The 100 Languages of Children, which talks about this whole approach. How do they go about doing documentation? But this was one clip. Uh, I could go to another clip. Actually, it will be nice to listen to one more clip. I think because uh,
What is
no, not this
important
one.
is that people
Yeah. So now she's talking about how documentation can help in professional development, and not a
Mhm.
professional development in the sense that, of course, it's very important to go to workshops and so on. And I myself enjoy going to workshops, and I love that work, teacher workshops and so on. But how can the professional development happen within school, within that community of teachers and children, right? So she's talking about what possibilities this documentation can open up. So I'll play this now.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
of a group. Documentation and shareability of documentation can be another good, important tool because when you take a picture, when you tape record something, or when you write notes, in reality, if you are able to reflect on them, you don't see only the child, the processes of the child, but you see yourself. You see what you are able to see and what you were not able to see or sign. I remember always my experience and the experience of many teachers tape recording what they were talking with the children and listening again what came out from their voice. They were really surprised and shocked by all the repetition, all the a mistake that they've made, and this was very good for them. A fantastic professional development where you can find your no own limit. You have the support of colleagues to come out, and also you can talk about self-assessment and also learning process as a teacher that you by yourself can drive.
So this we keep talking about reflection, reflective practitioners, and so on, right? But only when we get the opportunity to reflect on something, right, on something concrete. I mean, the
True.
concrete can be more concrete and immediate than your own class. Right? So she's talking about this, the opportunity of realizing, okay, oh my God, what did I do? Why didn't I do that? Or I missed that. This child had something to say, you know. Only then she is talking about mistakes, being excited about mistakes, because only when we realize, oh, our goof ups, that
Yeah.
we get a chance to really build on what we have right now, no? And not just alone, together with our colleagues. I mean, that is something that is to be able to offer feedback in a non-judgmental, objective way to each other, and to accept feedback also, right? I think this particular idea of documentation and reflecting on the documentation can be a very powerful tool, as Carlina Rinaldi says. Yeah.
Interestingly, I think one of our speakers from our earlier webinars has also mentioned how, watching his own classroom teaching video has helped him a lot on where to look out and where to develop. That was an interesting thing. And perhaps this is what you mean when you say that, the documentation can be used to anchor a collaborative dialogic process of pedagogical reflection, right?
Yes, actually, Vinay, exactly. This is exactly what I meant. In fact, I'm trying to learn from early childhood educationists because there's so much that they are doing because they are being so. I mean, they are dealing with very young children. Many children who are pre-verbal, children who are have a limited vocabulary, children who are learning how to write, how to speak, how to draw,
Mhm.
right? Children who are learning how to hold a pencil, all that, right? So what they are doing is paying attention in a very, as she said in the earlier, previous video, fully, not just listening, but paying attention, being present fully there with
Correct.
your students. I mean, that's a shift that she's talking about.
So, you suggested science is a both personal and a social process.
Before
So
I,
by
sorry, before we go to that,
yeah,
can I play one more clip because there's one more small clip that I had selected
sure,
from
sure,
that.
sure. Please, please.
Okay, thanks. I'll just do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and this is something beyond what she said about professional development, about what is the role of documentation in teaching learning processes. So I'll just play this video also.
Documentation, in synthesis, is an act of love through which you go closer to the child, close to the bigger effort that is doing, but also you discover your learning processes as a teacher, because it's the child and are the learning processes of the child that can drive you as a teacher to learn more about what does it means to be a teacher. And what came out is not only able to show the steps and the traces of the learning processes of the children, but also the steps and the traces of the learning processes of the teacher that learn to be a teacher. And the richness of this material can be shown and shared to the other teachers, but especially to the parents that can be participant and can find the beauty of the boy and the girl that are in their own son. Quite often, the parents used to look at the son and the daughter as their own expression. Instead, through documentation, they can meet the human being that they have in front of them and the richness also of the other children and the beauty of being a learning community.
Yeah, actually, so it's basically she's saying that it's giving like an even broader kind of change in attitude to looking at children, to looking at why we are doing this documentation from an instrumentalist kind of view. Okay, we are doing this documentation so that we can be better teachers. We can understand how the child is progressing from, say holding a pencil to drawing a full sketch, all that. Not just the cognitive aspects, right? There is a broader aspect of documentation involving the child, the teacher, the parent, and not just the parent, the community actually. Because now when you do documentation, okay, you say, okay, the child written uh, a wrong spelling of ear. Maybe the child has written, instead of writing EAR, the child has written ERE. Okay, fine. But you give it dignity. You say, fine, this child has written it this way. You display it. You put it on the notice board, huh? So that the child will see what they did. The teachers will, other teachers who are maybe also teaching that child will see what the child is doing. The parents will come to know what's happening, what are their child is doing, what are the child's. These efforts are heroic actually. These efforts are heroic in a way, right? The child is from holding a pencil to putting pencil on paper to making these letters and creating a word out of it. This could be a first word of a child, right? So to give that dignity and to involve everyone in the process, right? I mean, that is what people do in design and art college, right? In a design and art college, you do some work. You have some, say, a course on, say, color. Okay, so for a month, you are doing color. You're just finding the color palettes of, say, the fish market, the color palettes of a flower market, whatever. So, and you are doing some work. You are making these palettes. You are putting it up on the walls for
Hmm.
others,
Hmm.
your seniors, your juniors, your other people in your community, in your college or institute to look at. Right? So we are creating a community by sharing documentation. I mean, that's a very different approach. I would say that we have to learn from say,
Hmm.
even art and design education and early childhood education, both.
So
And
the this conversation, the videos that you have showed, they emphasize on why listening is an essential part of learning. So when you mentioned in the article the pedagogy of learning, is this what is meant? I mean,
pedagogy of listening, right? Yeah.
listening, sort of pedagogy of
Right,
listening.
right, right. In fact, yeah, it is this person, Carlina Rinaldi, who for a long time was a pedagogista. A pedagogista is a person who is in charge of documentation, who sometimes teaches also, but
Hmm.
a lot of time engages with documentation, like observes classes, works with teachers, teaches together with some other teacher, goes from teacher to teacher and talks to them about what's happening in their classes, collecting interesting and important samples of these documentation, children's ideas, efforts, and so on. So they have a whole structure in place to do this.
Hmm.
And in fact,
Okay.
that was a question that Vinay actually, how do we make it happen in a real school?
Yeah.
That was one question that uh, this how do we get this pedagogy of listening after having appreciated that yes, it is important. How do we actually make it happen in a in a
Regular
in a,
school.
in a schools or So I would like to show this one more slide actually, but
Hmm.
not able to present for some reason. I'll present again maybe 1 second.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, one minute. Is this no? It's not yet visible.
Not visible yet, but it's
Oh,
coming up.
oh, now it's coming. Okay, thanks. So this is we already did this, but
Yeah.
basically the idea that there is need for some support to do this, right? To make this happen, this kind of shift in perspective and practices in everyday teaching learning,
Hmm.
right? So how do we, what kind of support? It is something that all of us have to think about. I feel to really make
Okay.
this happen, really need to think about what kind of support is needed, what kind of shift is needed, right? But some tentative idea could be that there is some time in the week in which all everyone sits and thinks about what was the interesting things that happened in that week with their in their classes, which is maybe worth recording, sharing, or putting together, not just sharing, right? Putting something together,
Hmm.
collating something and sharing, right? As related things in this unit on something on plants and tissues. This is
Hmm.
these are the 10 things that emerge from this in this while teaching this unit on plants, suppose. So that kind of collation, bringing things together, putting them in relation to each other, and then sharing it, right? You need time. Someone needs to do that. Maybe even training, I would say, right? One needs
Hmm.
some training to some exposure and training to make this happen. So maybe a particular teacher takes on that role for 1 year, suppose, and that teacher has a slightly lesser teaching load for that year and does that kind of work and makes something happen. Like we can get so many interesting things coming. It can become a traveling exhibition of a 1 year of what were the interesting things that happened in our school, right? In 1 year, one academic year, these are the wonderful things that happen, and we have like a traveling exhibition of what children did, what teachers did, right? And not just at the last open the final end of the year kind of an exhibition, but it could be something that we work towards more seriously and not just as a formality, right? It could be like we want to do, and we build this year on year and year, and this is something that we are very confident about. This works with our students. This is what our students thought and did, so it can be passed on also, right? And across the country and on in time also, right? So this is some ideas that came. How do we get this community to learn and develop
Hmm.
together? And
So, while speaking of documentation and pedagogy, you also, I mean, along with pedagogy of listening, you also mentioned about 100 languages of children. So, while explaining the video, you mentioned it in a very brief manner. Could you please elaborate it?
yeah, actually, this 100 languages of children, it's the title of this book, okay, which I have mentioned, which is about the Reggio Emilia approach. But 100 languages of children is a poem. Actually, it's a poem written by someone called Loris Malaguzzi, who was one of the initial people who initiated these schools in the 50s and 60s and so on. Okay, and this, in fact, it will be nice if people Google this 100 languages of children poem by Loris Malaguzzi, because he's saying things that have been that Carlina Rinaldi was talking about, that also she not in detail, that a child can express not just in words, in speech. A child can express in many different ways, and it's not the child can or sing, dance, a child can a gesture, the body movement, everything. So what the 100 languages talks about is that 100 languages of children specifically talks about that adults, grown-ups, teachers have to be aware that children can express and tell them what they feel and think about something in many different ways. That's the main idea of that 100 languages, like so many ways that a child can express. That's actually
Hmm.
that's the idea. And I would say it's even very much. I feel it's necessary even at for higher classes as well, because even older children, when a teacher who is engaging in a dialogic kind of a teaching uh, pays attention and listens to students, their ideas and what they do also. And then, of course, as teachers, we are open, we understand these cues also, right? When we know that our class is engaged, and when we know when the class is not engaged, or we sense that, yeah, there is this group of students who are probably having some questions and they are not speaking up, you know? So we are already doing that in a way, but what this 100 languages of children says is that we have to be even more aware than that. That yes, children can express in so many different ways. Yeah.
That is quite interesting. So, you suggest that science is a both personal and a social process. No, we are acknowledging the existence within children of the seeds of science being a social process. Teachers and educators may find ways to help children deepen their engagement with science. No, could you please briefly explain this statement?
Yeah, actually, here in the article, I think I have not really written much about the social aspects, right? The social aspects in the sense that, well, if you look at the work of scientists also, it's not that they were working in a vacuum, right? They were working in a certain ecosystem of ideas, of exchanging those ideas with their contemporaries. If you look at Galileo, Galileo had written letters to Kepler, for example. Okay, and these letters, they used to write letters because, I mean, there was no email obviously, but they used to write letters because not everything they could say in the open, right? Like
True.
Galileo had observed the phases of Venus, which was a very big uh, evidence again for the heliocentric model or
Illustrated.
Copernican model, right? He wrote about this to Kepler, and then Kepler suggested something else to him, and so on. So it's always that we need to share our ideas, we need to learn from each other. We always do that. That is how science has progressed. That is how scientists have worked, and even today scientists work in the same way. You work in relation to other people's ideas, other people's work, other people's experiments, and so on, right? So what, even when children learn science, they need to listen to their classmates' ideas. They need more
Mm.
than, yeah, I would say more than the ideas of their teachers. So sometimes it so happens that in a particular class, only a few children, maybe only two, three children speak up and have a dialogue with teacher, right? But even that, other children listening to that also, while not participating directly in that dialogue, that is also of value, right? And then children learning from each other. I mean, this is a whole field, right? Peer learning,
Mhm.
peer, peer learning and peer feedback also. I mean, it's very important. Children are learning. In fact, there is some work which says that if suppose two students are there, they didn't know how to solve a particular problem in physics. Suppose, both of them didn't know. Okay, they got wrong answers, but then they got a chance to talk to each other. Their chance of reaching the right answer or the right understanding, the right conceptual understanding, increases when they get the opportunity to talk to each other. Just talking to each other by itself opens up opportunities to learn and go beyond what you currently know and understand. So yeah, very much a social. We need to acknowledge that social aspect of learning.
And you also say that the students should develop a personal connection with science and make it a process of their own. Uh, so, I mean, what does this mean and why it is important?
Right. Right. Actually, yeah, this is related. I feel that is related to the idea that your thoughts are important. Okay, not just your thoughts, your own thoughts, your the thoughts and ideas that your classmates, your friends have, your teachers have, everyone's, it's not only that we are learning from the textbook, right? We are engaging in this process of making sense of things. Yes, we learn from the textbook. The textbook is very important. But what really matters is what we feel about it, whether we are really convinced about it. If we are not, then we should be, even a teacher should be open enough to say that, understand what the textbook says, but I don't understand it fully. I am not really clear about this aspect. Being tentative, being like acknowledging that there is something more than what I understand now, right? And to take one's and others' ideas seriously, to experience things firsthand, right? And not just second hand from some textbook thing, right? To have some tentative ideas and to which may be wrong actually, but then to be open enough to understand, to correct that also. That is when we are constructing our own knowledge, right? We are actually like, if we really believe in a constructivist kind of a framework of learning, then that is what we should be doing, right? We should be engaging with it firsthand and back and forth, getting confused, learning from each other, questioning each other, giving some ideas, giving feedback, this arguing, learning, reading more, asking someone else. This whole dynamic process has to happen, right? So that is what probably I meant by personalizing it.
I mean, another related thing, especially when, this is something which I find interesting as well. Given all these things, now how does a teacher sustain students' interest and motivation to study science?
Yeah. So actually, by listening, I think by giving by dignifying students' ideas and work, only then they feel that they are capable of learning, they are capable of thinking on their own. They feel that confidence. Okay, fine, it's okay to go wrong, it's okay to make mistakes, but what matters is to make progress, right? Basically, to wherever you are, to be able to move on, to move ahead, to progress from that, right? That is what matters, probably.
Thank you, Anish. That has been such a nice conversation, and thank you a lot for
Thank
sharing
you.
your thoughts.
Thank you, Vinay, for
Yeah,
your wonderful questions also, and nice to talk to you.
yeah, and the team that worked on these questions behind the screen too.
Thank you, everyone.
So, thank you, Anish, and all of those who have joined us today. Thanks a lot. We may not have been able to take the questions. Sincerely apologize for that. But if you have any pressing questions for the author, you can email them at iwonder@abu.edu.in. We will do our best to get them answered. So thanks a lot for joining us today, and please do not forget we will be having it on every second Wednesday of every month, and our next webinar would be on 14 December 2022. Please join us then. And for all of those who have not yet subscribed to us, please do so. Thanks a lot.